What is going on, investors? Hopefully you guys are doing well out there. Time to talk about Plug Power, ticker symbol Plug. This company just reported their earnings, and we will get into them. We'll take a look at the revenue, the guidance, the profit, those types of things. Now, this is a stock I've been somewhat hard on here on the channel. Every video that I've posted has been rather critical of this company, especially from a financial perspective. But look, every time companies like this put out new numbers, and we'll walk through these, I'll help you make sense of all these numbers. It is a time to look fresh at these companies and take a look. Over the last year, if you'd invested in Plug Power a year ago, you'd be up 183% on this one. So despite the meteoric drop, especially year to date, this thing's actually down 23%. And if you look on a tighter time frame, like a 6-month basis, this thing is down 61%. There's still money to be made here. But what I want to point out before we get into the numbers and all those types of things, we go through a system here on the investor channel, and the system has worked for me and has worked for me over many, many years. Here is my IRA account. Over the last 3 years, the IRA account is up 111%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 36%. The S&P 500 is up 54%. And the NASDAQ is up 88%. The system that we go through, analyzing the earnings, the revenues, the profits, those types of things of these companies, that is the exact same process I use for picking stocks in my retirement account, which has beaten all the major averages over the last few years. So no offense to Plug Power, no offense to anybody that is invested in this company. And I tell you what, you bought it a year ago, you're up huge on this one. So we'll talk about Plug Power from a fundamental perspective. We'll also look at it from a technical perspective as well. We're not seeing a lot of movement in the shares in the after hours. And so we'll talk about, is this an opportunity where you can accumulate shares of Plug Power if you buy in to what they are selling here on their financials. Now, they kick things off with a balance sheet, really nice balance sheet, okay? The right-hand column is the beginning of the year. Left-hand column is 6 months in. They've got $3.1 billion in cash, another $81 million in receivables, another $1.2 billion, it looks like, in some reserved cash or reserve securities that they could sell and raise cash if they needed to. You could probably imagine where a lot of this cash is coming from, since we will get down to the statement of income. Not a lot of liabilities on this company's balance sheet. They've raised a ton of money by selling not product, but actually Plug Power stock. We'll talk about that more here in a second. Now, let's get to the statement of operations, which is profit and loss. We've got our revenue here. We've got sales of fuel cell systems and related infrastructure in the most recent quarter, which is this left-hand column, that came in right very close to $100 million. Last year we were at 47. So that's actually pretty nice, right? Okay, and take a look at services performed on fuel cell systems. That came in at 5.6 million, rather I wouldn't want to say insignificant, but obviously a lot less than the sale of the fuel systems themselves. Last year we were at 6.2 million. So we went down from 6.2 to 5.6. Power purchase agreements went up from 6.6 million up to about 8.3. Fuel delivered to customers went from 7.3 million up to 11.1. Now, here's always been our issue with Plug Power, not this revenue growth, because you see net revenues over the last year on a quarterly basis went from 68 million up to 124 million. Guys, it's not quite a double, but it's pretty darn close. So the revenue growth is not at all a problem. If you want to check the box of revenue growth, Plug Power certainly delivers that. Here's always the problem with Plug Power is here's the cost of the sales of fuel cell systems. That cost us $80 million, almost on the dot, to make $99 million, or nearly $100 million. I wouldn't call those small margin, but that's a relatively low margin business. Let's see how the rest of this plays out. Service performed on the fuel cell systems cost $15.5 million. I'll remind you that we actually only made $5.67 million. So take a look at this. Last year, we made $6.2 million off this business model. This year, it went down. It went down to $5.7 million. Take a look at our cost. They went from $7.8 million to nearly doubled. In fact, they basically doubled to 15.5. So wait a second. Our sales went down, but our cost of those sales doubled. Is that a problem? Yeah, you guessed it. Here's our power purchasing agreements. Here's our power purchasing agreements. So that went from 6.5 to 8.3 million. Well, look what we spent on it. $22.2 million. Last year we spent 14.5. So we increased it by about 1.7 million on the top line, but our cost increased by like 8 million. Does this make any sense? Fuel delivered to customers. Take a look. That grew by about, we'll call that 4 million because you went from 7.3 to 11.1. It's a little less than 4 million, but we'll keep the numbers easy to understand. Fuel delivered to customers. This is the cost of that. Went from 11 million to 40 million, and nearly 4x the cost. Okay, we only bolted on another 4 million, actually less than that, 3.8 million, but we bolted on $29 million worth of cost. So before you get into the comments, because I get the same comments on Plug Power every time I post a video on Plug Power. It's, hey, Walmart's a customer and Amazon's a customer. Well, hello, you realize why they're customers is because they're getting the fuel for free. They're literally getting fuel from Plug Power for less than what it actually cost. Take a look. Total cost of revenues came in at $164 million. Okay, so our net revenues were $124 million. Our total cost of revenues was $164 million. Those are, guys, that's not low margins. Those are negative margins. They're literally running a negative margin business. So next time you want to get in the comments and say, hey, Walmart's a customer, Amazon's a customer, all these people are partnering with Plug Power. Again, hello, Amber Alert, the CEOs of those companies are not freaking idiots. They are seeing these financial documents just like we are. Fuel delivered to customers costs Plug Power $40 million. It only costs the customers $11 million. Yeah, maybe I'm thinking about going out and buying a hydrogen fuel cell car, truck, or whatever. If Plug Power is going to sell me the fuel for 4 times less than what it actually cost. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous. Gross loss. You don't see this very often. Negative $40.3 million. Last year, we were at negative 15 million. And I think some people last year during this time, and the stock was way higher than it was this year. But look, $15 million loss. I think there's probably some investors that looked at this and said, look, we're turning the corner over at Plug Power. We're getting more partnerships. We're going to start making a profit here. No, it's the losses have actually accelerated. Take a look at for the last 6 months, we've lost $52 million. Again, this is gross loss. I haven't gotten to R&D. I haven't gotten to selling general administrative fees. Okay, we still have other costs associated with this business. This is just the cost of this revenue. This is like material cost and those types of things. Gross loss for the last 6 months was $52 million. That means we lost about $12 million in the last quarter. So we went from losing $12 million all the way up to $40 million. So things are going from bad to worse over at Plug Power from a gross profit perspective. And I tell you what, the revenue growth is nice, but after that, this company is a complete and utter disaster. Operating expenses on research and development, we went from 4.8 up to 11.2 million. Selling general administrative, this didn't go up nearly as much as I thought it might. You went from 21 million up to 38 million. That's still nearly doubling that. Our total operating expenses went from 26 to 49, so just short of a double. That makes an operating loss. So we take this 40 million and then we minus another 49 million away from it. That means this company in the last 3 months, is running at a $30 million per month run rate. Basically, Plug Power loses $1 million a day because 3 months is about 90 days. They lost $90 million. Plug Power is losing $1 million per day running the business. That is why the CEOs of Walmart and Amazon are gladly buying fuel from a company like this, because shareholders are propping up this company that really should probably not be in business. We see last year they lost 26 million. For the last 6 months, we've lost 137 million. Last year, we had lost 52 million on a 6 months basis. Now, the other thing that I want to show you is the weighted average number of common shares outstanding. Last year, we had 316,000 shares. Yeah, you guessed it. That went up considerably as well. 567,000 shares or million shares now. And that has led to pressure on the stock as well. Okay. Anytime you have that amount of dilution, it just puts more shares out there. It means more people can sell this stock. Now let's take a look from cash flows. Look, there could be some funky stuff going on with this company. Okay. There could be some funky cost, depreciation, non-cash stuff that could be messing with the financials a little bit. Oh, last thing I want to show you, take a look at this interest expense. $10 million. Okay. So this is a company that did revenues of $124 million in a quarter. Their interest, just the money that they have to pay the banks in order to lend them money, $10.2 million. When I looked into this company several months ago, they're borrowing money at like a nearly credit card rate. Now, prime credit card interest rates, but I have credit cards that have less than a 10%, like 8-9% interest, which is pretty good. A lot of credit cards go up to 20% interest. That's about the one loan that I looked at with Plug Power last year was paying about 11%. So it's just showing you banks and lenders are looking at the same financials that we are. And they're like, oh no, we're not going to lend you money at prime rates. You're playing subprime rates. And that is exactly where Plug Power is. Now, cash flows, maybe some of this has some indicative nature on these, but look, share-based compensation came in at 20 million. They get to add back in. All things being considered, net cash used by operating activities, the cash flows actually played a worse picture. So our net loss was 160, but factoring in cash flows, we actually burned through $240 million in 6 months. It actually gets worse. It doesn't get better when you look at cash flows. It actually gets worse. Last year, we were sitting at 111 million. Now, the way this company is, some of you might be wondering, well, how does a company like this stay in business? Well, they got a bunch of shareholders that are believing the hype and believing the story, and they proceeds from public and private offerings. This is issuance of the stock. They made $3.6 billion, okay? And you better believe the executives of this company have gotten extraordinarily rich. So it makes me want to get in the business of selling stuff at a loss, but creating all these press releases and all this hype and all this stuff and put, great little PowerPoint. This is a great little PowerPoint photo that they paid somebody to put up. And notice that goes towards the top of a press release. And then they hide down here like the absolute disaster numbers that these are. But I guarantee you, the CEOs of Amazon and Walmart and whoever else this company partners with, they come down and look at those things and they're like, yeah, I'll take some fuel from Plug Power. Let's put out a press release about that. Now, from a technical perspective, stock's just kind of going sideways. Okay, it made this big old top up here, $75 per share. It's came all the way down to about 18. It found some footing in 18, bounced to 34, came down here. It's really right in the middle of a range, sitting right here about $26 per share. The bottom of that range is 18. The top of the range is 34. I wouldn't be bullish this stock or saying, hey, this stock is, back in rally mode until we get above 34. Okay, we tried to get above 34. We stayed there for a couple days and the thing got rejected. Okay, and so I really wouldn't say that this downtrend is likely still intact. This stock looks like it wants to keep going lower until it gets over $34 per share, which is about $9 away from where the stock is trading right now, which is pretty significant. $9 on a $26 stock is actually a considerable move to get up to the previous highs, and actually you need to surpass them. I really think you need to get to 36, maybe even $38, which is $12 higher than where the stock is right now. That's like a 30, nearly 40% move on a stock like this. It'd be interesting to see if it's able to pull that off. Now, the downtrend is still intact, and especially if you come down here and retest 1850. From a technical perspective, I wouldn't be loving life coming down here and buying at 1850, but I could see making that argument. Okay, I could see maybe a small technical argument too, right where the stock is hitting right now, but then again, your upside is probably back up to 34, 36, and your downside's all the way to 18. You've got almost equal upside to downside. You really like to flip that on its head. Whereas if you bought Plug Power down here at 1840, I think you could put a stop loss down at $17 or something, $16, risk $2 a share, and with upside of $16, $17 per share, that would be the trade-off that I would look for. So Plug Power doesn't check a lot of the boxes, and you can just look at the stock performance. Yes, it's rallied hard, but it has came down hard quickly. If you have a lot of these types of stocks in your portfolio, yes, for 1 month, 2 months, your performance graph might look really good, but over 3 years, you are not going to beat just average index funds, whether it's a Dow Jones index fund, an S&P index fund, or a NASDAQ index fund, or even blend these together. You're not going to beat the markets by investing in companies like this. Can this be speculative money out of a $50,000 portfolio? You put aside $1,000 to do straight gambles on these types of companies? Sure, certainly that could have worked out, especially if you bought this at a much, much lower price when it was essentially a penny stock. So we'll see what happens with Plug Power. I'm not a fan of this from a buy and hold perspective. There's no fundamental reason why you would buy this company. They have negative margins, and those negative margins are, believe it or not, they're expanding. So they're getting even worse on a year-over-year basis and a quarter-over-quarter basis. But believe me, expect Plug Power to put out press release after press release saying, hey, we partnered with this company. We partnered with this government. We partner with this company and this company and this company to sell them fuel. Well, of course they would. Like, all the companies that I invest in, I'm wondering why they haven't partnered with Plug Power. Because it cost them $40.3 million to deliver fuel that they only charged $11.1 million for. So, of course, I would be buying fuel from Plug Power. So, eventually, I think stocks like this will absolutely get crushed, but in the shorter term, maybe from a swing trade perspective, you might have something here. The last thing that I'll leave you with is you got a $15 billion. That is not million. That is a $15 billion market cap on a company that has to pay near credit card interest rates on their debt, that have expanding negative margins, okay, and a vastly increasing operating loss as well that went from 26 to 90 million just over the last year. This company is a complete and utter disaster. I would run from it as fast as I can and find some company that actually has an opportunity to grow into a valuation that is this high, but also capture much, much more market share without having to give away its product. That was Plug Power. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. We'll be back again soon with more. Good luck with your investments.